A number of years ago, I guess for lack of a better term, I kind of had a wedding business. I kind of fell into it with the TW Chapel, and Denton had begun to use me as the clergy person there on campus at Texas Women's University, and I was doing 35, 40 weddings a year as a time when I was enjoying doing that. I thought if I were going to write a book, though, about my ministry career, it would be things I couldn't tell you what happened at some of the weddings I went to. One of them I will tell you this morning. I got there, and I met with the couple. They had told me what they wanted, and we had done all the appropriate things you do to get ready for a ceremony. And what they hadn't told me yet was, I always say, now when you get there, I want you to give the license to me right away, so I make sure we've got everything in order. And so make sure I either get that license at rehearsal or first thing when you arrive, make sure someone gets me the license. Well, I got there, and they said, Pastor, there's no license. I said, what? Okay, tell me why. He said, well, we're already married, and nobody here knows that. Oh, okay. Now, at that point, of course I'm curious what's going on here at that point. But did I really need to know what was going on there in order to be helpful? No, I just went on and I did the blessing, the spiritual union of their union, and I still don't know the secret behind why they are already married. I just didn't need to know. Secrets are funny things, aren't they? I mean, I'm not talking about the kind of secret that you have to have sometimes. You know, sometimes some people just don't need to know something. And that's not really a secret. Like I was telling you in that wedding illustration, I had no need to know that. In fact, if you feel like you need to know something you don't really need to know, it may say something about you don't want other people to know. Did you follow that? I'll say it again. If you need to know something you really don't need to know, it may tell you something. It may tell other people something about you that you really didn't want them to know. But there are the kinds of secrets that are out there that can be disabling, can be destructive, and oftentimes are the problems of many families. Secrets, that is. This part of the family knows this, but this part of the family doesn't know that. And the secrets are kind of fostered. I've seen secrets be fostered in a church family too. Let's not tell the pastor about that. Well, I've seen pastors do it. I won't tell them what I'm really up to. Secrets. And Jesus asked this man to keep a secret. Did you hear that? Do not tell anyone what has happened to you or how it happened. Now, any of our ideas about why Jesus asked this man not to tell is only speculation. It's mere speculation. We really don't know why he asked him not to tell. But we can be certain about this. Jesus would not have asked him not to tell in order to deprive or to keep the good news of being made whole away from some people. So we know it's not that reason, for sure. But I want to set aside this whole secret request thing, and I want us to focus more on this story today, for it tells us about a universal pattern of how we truly can come and be made whole. It's universal, and it's been generational, and it will always be true. How we can come and be made whole. It requires a position of powerlessness and a posture of humility. The position of powerless is pictured by this leper in how Stephanie described it, an unnamed man who was powerless over this skin disease. Leprosy was the name given to any disease of the skin. Sometimes the disease was contagious, sometimes it wasn't contagious, but it was still called leprosy in that first century world. You can imagine how it might begin. Someone looks down and they sees a spot on another person's hand. They go, "Where did that rash come from? What's that spot that you're seeing on your skin?" "I don't know. What is that?" It just appeared. In the first century world, Stephanie is correct when she told the children a minute ago. That is immediate response. An immediate response is you would be isolated to the outskirts of the city where the lepers would live. You would receive food, leftover food that would be brought to the gates of the city and set outside the gates so you could at least have nourishment. And all they could do was pray for a miracle, that somehow this skin disease would go away. And they really didn't expect it to go away, frankly. They were powerless. No chances were taken in the first century for these skin diseases. They had limited medical knowledge, and so quarantine was the only sure answer. Oh, we recognize that language. No longer welcome in the presence of anybody, including your own family. Powerless to do anything about it. The priests were the medical authorities. Now, they didn't bring a cure. They couldn't make you well. But what they would do is they'd come and inspect the leper gatherings and see if and once they decided they were clean or they were healing, then the priest could absolve them, then they would be able to move back into their homes and into the community. A leper is powerless. This man particularly. At some point, it's not a matter if, it's a matter when. We will find ourselves powerless, unable to do anything about the circumstances that are before us, unable to make any kind of changes. These can be small things that we cannot change, or sometimes some very large things that disable us. They enter our lives and we feel like we're in a tailspin. Some of you may feel that way when you walked in here this morning, completely powerless, unable to do anything about this unexpected turn that you're experiencing in your life. It could be regarding your physical wellness. It could be because it's diminishing. It could be because your emotional satisfaction is depleted. It could be your material successes are fading away. It could be your social standing in the world is at risk. You just know you lack the power to do anything about it. That sense of powerless can cause all kinds of erratic and unusual behaviors, don't you know? One of the more common things that happens when a person feels powerless is they need external affirmation. They need someone to say it's going to be okay, and so they go around begging for it. Please, they go to friends, they go to family, they go to neighbor. I just need to hear something's going to be okay. And after a while, their demand for affirmation and their need to be heard or wears thin, doesn't it? Their cries from their heart cannot be heard because they're just too much for us to handle. We can't do anything about it anyway. And so what happens then? They go further into isolation because others withdraw amidst their powerless situation. But why does it take a position of powerlessness to be made whole? You've been to AA? You don't have to raise your hand. What's the first thing they tell you? There's a higher power in your life. What's part of that middle sections? Some of you know of what steps you have to take. You have to acknowledge that I am powerless over this in order to overcome. Because that's the doorway. That is the position that all of us have to take if we really want to be made whole. It begins by saying, I can't do anything on the outside of me, but once we know we can't do anything on the outside of us, we are now ready to be made whole from the inside out. It may not change our circumstances, but it'll change our person if we can say, I can't do this. It needs to happen from beyond me and within me. And Jesus was beyond this man who touches him, as the text says. When Jesus touches him, the unclean becomes clean, showing us when we wrongly assume that if the clean touches the unclean, the clean are going to become unclean. That's not the way it works. And when the powerless are touched by this power beyond them, they experience a power within them that begins the healing process from inside out, connecting them to a source of life that they cannot connect to in any other way. If you're seeking to be made well, it starts with a powerless position. And it continues with a humble posture. That posture leads us, in order to become and be made well, to humility. I decided a few years ago what was the root of all sin. It's not money, it's ego. It's our own egos that gets in the way, that when we resist to be humble enough, the human condition is such that our troublemaking ego causes us to think that we can do something better, we can figure our way out of it, or we can learn our way to it. That's our ego speaking. I put this in the sermon tease this morning. If someone said you could find new life on a mountain, I think you'd hike the mountains of Tibet with ankle weights, whistling Dixie all the way up. Some of us would, because our ego says, I can do this. Maybe even blindfolded. We want to think we can find life by our own efforts. And it's that ego that fundamentally demonstrates that I resist, that says, I am not dependent on anything or anybody. But it takes humility to access the power that comes from above us that makes us whole. It takes humility to go before others who can help us access that power. There's another leper in the Old Testament that goes parallel to this story. Remember Naaman? Naaman was a general in the Syrian army. He gets leprosy in 2 Kings chapter 5, if you want to read the story later. He feels powerless, just like this other leper, over his skin disease. And what happens in that story is this. Naaman's wife has a Hebrew slave girl. The Hebrew slave girl tells Naaman's wife and tells Naaman, look, there is a prophet back in Israel that can make you well. There's irony, isn't it? A man who had stolen this girl from her family now offers him a good word of hope. Well, he humbles himself enough to decide to believe it. And when you read the story, you'll see that he goes and petitions the king in order to see if he could access this healing power for his leprosy. Well, the king wants nothing to do with this life and death request. And Elisha steps in, the prophet. Elisha steps in and says, send the man to me, king. I will deal with him. And Elisha tells him to go wash in the Jordan. And then Naaman goes on this rant. Why are the waters of the Jordan greater than the waters from which I came? He almost refused this life-saving power that could make him whole. But his servants, in 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 13, say this. If the prophet told you to do a heroic act, you would have done it. Since he's given you a simple command, you are too proud to obey it and perhaps be healed. Naaman was shook. And he humbles himself and washes himself 7 times in the dirty water of the Jordan River. The leper in our story humbles himself. He takes this posture of humility. He falls on his knees and he pleads for mercy and health. And it's his faith that Jesus could touch him and make him whole again that brings about his healing. May our lack of humility keep us from not connecting to the one who can give us life and wholeness. It's a humble faith, my friends. It's a humble faith in a God and others who can help us be made whole. The good news is not a secret, friends, at all. It's a common, simple faith in a power beyond us that we humbly admit that with that power can make us whole. It's a simple thing, and why would we allow simplicity to get in the way other than our what? Our ego. We think we know better. So why did Jesus ask this man to not go tell anybody? Again, it's all conjecture on our part why he might have asked him. Maybe he didn't want the masses to dictate his mission. Maybe he wasn't ready to confront the ruling authorities. Maybe he didn't want people just to come to him to do miracles. But I think there is a clue that at least gives us a better guess on why Jesus asked him to not tell anybody. What did Jesus tell the man to do? He says, go show yourself to the priest, following the Mosaic law. Remember, I told you earlier, it was the priest who declared whether a person was clean. Jesus wanted the religious authorities to know that people can come and be made whole outside ecclesiastical institutions. He wanted the religious authorities to see there was a power beyond them. For the pathway to wholeness, sometimes they're led by traits that are unfamiliar to religious insiders. I am powerless, and I humble myself before you. And the religious leaders were given a glimpse into a power that could make people whole that they could not concoct or contain. And this man couldn't contain himself. He goes out and tells everybody what has happened to him. Every time I read this story, I oftentimes think of what the scene must have been back when he returned back home after being made whole. You imagine him walking to the door and the family sees him and they go, look, you've been healed. You no longer have leprosy. And the family is screaming for joy. And the man, I made this up in my mind's eye, but I can see it. In my mind's eye, I can see the man going, yes, I've been healed. But something greater happened to me. Someone touched me. And it's in that spirit, my friends, when we have been touched by the power of God that can make us whole, we cannot contain ourselves. Can I get a witness? All God's people said what? Amen. I'm going to